Are you wanting to start your first vegetable garden, but you're wondering if maybe it's a little bit too late in the season to get started? Well, I'm here today to tell you it's not too late and that you should get started. There's still plenty of time in the growing season, and it's just warm enough to plant some things from seeds and they will get started happily. I live here near Seattle, Washington. This is the Puget Sound behind me, and we are in zone 8B. If you live in a zone that's a little bit cooler or a little bit warmer, these are still going to be great examples of things that you can plant right now to start your very first vegetable garden. This is also going to be a container style garden. I'm going to be potting up these plants in pots on my upper deck here. I have most of my vegetable garden down here in these terraces, but I really want to be able to show people that have smaller spaces how much food you can actually grow in your space. So if you're limited to a small patio or a deck, this is something that you can do to grow food for you and your family. It's also, you can plant these in the ground too. You don't have to use pots. And the great part about starting this garden is that I only had to invest $35 to get started. And I'm going to show you a few ways where I saved money to make this a affordable project to get you started in the world of gardening. So sit back and join me and watch how you can start your very own garden today. I'll be planting most of my vegetables in these small pots that I just purchased from Costco. I got a 5-pack for 20 bucks, so they were only about $4 per pot. Now, these pots are definitely the smallest I would recommend going for vegetable gardening in a container. They're about 12.5 inches across, but they're only about 8.5 inches deep. So you really want to make sure that you have a nice deep container so that you give plenty of room for your roots to grow. The first vegetable that I'm going to be planting is this purple plum radish. Now, radishes don't do super well in hot, warm weather, so this is kind of the last time I'll be growing radishes until the fall. So if you live in a warmer climate like California or something further south where it's going to get hotter quicker, you might steer clear from radishes and plant something else instead. These radishes take about 30 days to reach maturity. I've found that in my garden it takes a bit longer than that to get the radishes to a size where I'm ready to eat them. Now that it's a bit warmer, I'm hoping that it won't take quite as long, and perhaps I could even grow a second crop out of this container of something else later in the season. The radish seeds are a small, roundish shaped seed, and each seed is going to turn into a radish. So you're going to want to space these radishes seeds about 1 to 1.5 inches apart. I'm going to keep my spacing on the lower end because I'm just going to want them all to be maximizing the space in this container, and I can thin out anything that is too close together. So I'm going to start with these going in a circular pattern. Planting in a circular container with vegetables is new to me. I'm so used to rectangular and square spaces, but I'm really excited to test things out in a circular space. So I'll be planting these in some concentric circles in this container. All right, now that these are all in the ground, I want to show you what my spacing looks like. It's hard to tell, but I made a circle here with the seeds about 1 inch apart. And then I made a second concentric circle here with the seeds a little bit closer than 1 inch apart. Now this is really pushing it on capacity of this container, so I'll definitely have to thin things out as they grow larger. Next, I'll be just covering this up with a fine layer of about 1/4 inch of soil. So I just kind of cover those up like that. And then I'll water this container in when I'm all done and it's ready to go. So the soil that I'm using in my containers today is black gold potting soil. Now, the really awesome thing is how I got this potting soil. I buy a lot of plants from my local Fred Meyer Garden Center. It's really convenient, it's super close, they're very healthy plants. And every year they do a fuchsia potting event where customers can come in and bring their own pot, buy fuchsia starts, and they will plant them up for you in black gold potting soil for free. Well, this year that event was canceled, and they have 3 huge pallets full of black gold potting soil that they were going to use for that event, and they're giving it away free to customers who purchase either pots or plants. You can bring in your own containers and just fill them up. Here's a clip of when I was at the garden center scoring all that free soil. Hey everybody, I'm back here at Fred Meyer filling up some pots with free black gold potting soil. See those big pallets with those plastic bags of soil behind me? Those were going to be the soil that the Fred Meyer Garden Center was going to use for their fuchsia potting event that they do earlier in the spring, where you purchase your starts and bring the pot and they will plant them up for you in black gold potting mix. But that event was canceled, and so they have this soil that they're giving out for free when you purchase pots or plants. So I am taking advantage of this and so excited about the opportunities for growing vegetables and flowers this is going to give me. So if you've got a Fred Meyer Garden Center local, you should call or stop by and check out to see if they happen to have any available too. So the soil I'm using in all of my containers today was that free soil, and that's really saving me quite a bit of money, because this could have easily cost over $20 just in the cost of soil to fill all of these containers. So if you have a Fred Meyer near you, call the garden center, drop by and see if they're offering any free soil if you buy plants or buy containers, and see what they can do for you. The next plant that I'm going to be planting are these Ferrari bush beans. These are my favorite bush bean. I grew them last year from seed, and I have these seed packets left over. So when you're gardening, the cost of seeds, while I included it in my $35 investment right now, is you're going to be able to use that investment over multiple years. So these bush beans are delicious. They're very tender and great to eat. Now, I soaked my beans overnight in some water just to speed up germination. There's other things you can do to try to speed up the germination. I gave a few tips in my pumpkin seed starting video. If you want to check out that video, I'll show you some more tips on germinating seeds quickly. So for my bush beans here, they're not going to need any trellising support. They're not a pole bean. They will support themselves. And I'm going to be, I can't decide if I should plant them in the concentric circle to match this, or if I should plant them in lines. I think I'm going to go for the concentric circle just because it's such a different way of planting for me. I should probably double check to see what the spacing should really be. So the package says that I should space them about every 4 inches. So I'm going to plant them every 2 inches just to ensure that everything germinates, and then I can thin them out later. So instead of 2 concentric circles, I just did 1 circle and then 2 beans in the middle. These are going to get pretty bushy, so it's going to be really pushing the limits on this little container. I'm going to plant these about 1 inch deep in the soil. I'm not covering them up yet because I want you to be able to see where they're at. Check out the spacing. So you can see these are about 2 inches apart, and I'm likely going to be thinning out every other bean. They're kind of hard to see because I squished them down in there, but they're in there. And they're a little bit deeper than I did with the radishes. So I'm going to cover these up. Okay, next up, I'm really going to be testing the capacity of this little container. I'm going to be growing this early prolific straight neck yellow squash. My kids, for some reason, prefer yellow squash over a zucchini, and I've got a really picky 6-year-old, so whatever I can do to get him to eat vegetables, I'll grow a yellow squash instead of a green one. Now, what I haven't shown in the last 2 videos is that it's going to be really important to fertilize your container garden. And to be honest, I just forgot to put the fertilizer in those 2 containers, but I think they're going to be just fine. So I'm going to get started by putting about 2 tablespoons, not even a quarter of a cup of fertilizer in this container. This is an all-purpose organic fertilizer from Job's. It's great for, it's a granule fertilizer that's great for putting in your soil when you are starting your plants. If you're starting your plants in a container, or if you're starting your plants in a raised bed or an in-ground bed, it's still important to start them off with some good fertilizer. So all of these tips and things that I'm showing you today, you can apply these same things to a garden that's in a raised bed or in the ground. You just want to make sure that if you're in the ground, that you're going to amend your soil with some compost or something healthy and nutritious to really set your plants off for a good start. But really, you can plant a vegetable in any spot of ground that you have available to you. Give it some fertilizer, some compost, and just see what you can grow. You don't have to have the perfect growing space. So here, I'm going to get started by just adding a bit of fertilizer. I don't get too technical with my fertilizer. I just kind of eyeball it. So this is probably more like 3 tablespoons, and I'm going to mix that in to the soil. Now with container gardening, you're not just going to fertilize your garden, and same with in-ground beds or raised beds. You're not just fertilizing when you plant your plant at the very beginning. You're also going to want to fertilize it throughout the season, especially with potted plants and container gardening, because as you water it and the water drains out of that container, the nutrients are draining out of the soil. So I like to start off with a granulated fertilizer, and then once the plant's established, I use a water-soluble fertilizer. Now, the capacity of this container is really probably only going to be large enough for 1, maybe 2 plants. I'm going to plant quite a bit more seeds. I'm probably going to put about 5 seeds in here, and then I'll be thinning it down to 1 or maybe 2, just because I really like to push things. If this were an in-ground bed, I would happily leave it at 2 plants per hill, and it would be just fine. But since this is such a small container, it's going to be important to give plenty of space for the plant so they're not competing over the nutrients in the soil. So I'm going to make my first 2 holes of the plants that I really want to keep, and I'm going to put those there and assume that those seeds are going to germinate. And then I'm going to plant some extra ones in some other spots that would be a little bit less ideal of a spot to locate the plant in this pot. And then I'll thin them down to the ones that I really want to keep. Zucchini and summer squash turn into really big plants, so I'm really excited to see how they fare in this relatively small container. Let me give you a look at how I planted the seeds. So if I'm going to have 2 plants out of here, I'm going to want to keep these 2 seeds right here. But I did include these here just in case I have any problems with germination. I've planted those about 1 inch deep, and I'm going to cover those up, and I'm going to water them in when I'm all done. Before I jump into this 4th vegetable that I'm going to show you how to plant, I want to talk about seeds. So there's lots of different types of seeds. There's heirloom seeds, there's organic seeds, there's hybrid seeds, all sorts of things. Once you start learning more about gardening and learning more about different varieties of seeds, you can dive into what type of seed is most important to you to grow. This seed here is a Fairy Morse organic seed. I'm not particularly attached to the Fairy Morse brand. However, I got these seeds for free, even though I did calculate them into the $35 budget for this project. I got them for free at the local Pierce County seed swap. So the seed swap that I went to back in the spring, I got a ton of seeds for my garden, all for free. And I was even able to bring some seeds to share that I had saved from some of my vegetables, and I brought the seeds from my giant pumpkin to share. So that's another great way where you can save money for gardening, is looking out for local sources of seed swaps and things like that to be able to get free seeds for your garden. So this next vegetable that I'm growing is the cucumber muncher. I love cucumbers, and my kids really love cucumbers, so I grow a lot of cucumbers. The vegetables that I'm showing you today are vegetables that my family likes to eat. So if some of these vegetables you don't like, don't grow them in your garden. The best vegetables to grow in your garden are vegetables that you like to eat. Something cool that I'm also going to be doing with these cucumber seeds is that I'm going to be planting 2 pots of cucumber seeds, and I'm going to be doing a test, and I'm going to compare 2 different types of water-soluble fertilizers just to see which one works better. So I'm actually not going to put in that granule fertilizer because I want to wait and fertilize them with the water-soluble fertilizer to really test those as in controlled of environment as possible. Now, cucumbers are a trellis, they're a vining crop, and they're going to want to climb on something. So they're going to want to either climb up a trellis, or they would sprawl out and crawl in your in-ground beds. But it's really good for cucumbers to get them up off the ground. It helps keeps the plant more disease-free, and it helps your actual cucumber fruit turn out a little bit nicer. I'm going to be using the railing of my deck and some string to tie up these cucumbers as their trellis. These containers are a bit too shallow for me to be using a tomato cage. A tomato cage is a great option for trellising your cucumbers, especially those smaller sized tomato cages. So for these cucumbers, I'm going to be planting 5 seeds in here, and again, I'll likely need to thin them down. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go gangbusters. I'm going to do even more than 5 seeds. I think I'm going to do maybe about 6, and I'm going to maximize the space in here and see what I can do. Nothing wrong with trying something and seeing how it turns out. That's how you learn more about gardening, is just by trying something new and seeing what the results are. So if I'm planting way too much in these containers, well, I'll learn a lesson, and then next time I'll plant less. So the cucumber seeds look just like the seeds in a cucumber that you would eat in your kitchen, because they're the same thing. Now these cucumber seeds, I did not soak these ahead of time, but if you were really wanting them to start sooner, you could buy these cucumbers as starts, and you would start having cucumbers sooner than you would if you started them from seed. You could also grow those yellow squash. You could grow those from starts if you really wanted to get your garden producing fruit for you faster. However, I wanted to show that it's still possible to grow things from seed, and it's a little bit more economical to grow things from seed, especially when you're looking at beans and radishes. Those actually don't do well growing from transplants, but things where you're going to be having multiple plants, it's a lot more economical than buying each of the plants, because in here you can grow just more than one cucumber plant. So growing them from seed is more economical, but if you want to go out and buy a couple starts, or plant one start and then add some seeds to it, and then you have a little bit of a succession so that you get fruits over a longer period of time. Let me show you the spacing on these cucumbers. All right, so I ended up planting, oh golly, like about 10 seeds in here, and I'll be thinning that down after they germinate. You can see they're all planted, well, it's probably hard to tell, but they're about maybe 3/4 of an inch deep. I'm going to leave that uncovered because I'm going to plant my second pot, and I want it to look as identical to my first pot as possible, and then I'll cover those seeds up. Okay, so I've got these planted nearly as identical as I can, and I will be covering those up with soil, and of course thinning those out after they germinate. This last container that I'm going to show you is a really big one. So I'm planting it here in the corner where I'm going to grow it, so that I didn't have to move it from that other area of my deck over here. Now this container is very large and would be pretty expensive if you bought it. However, I got this container for free. I'm a part of a Facebook group called Buy Nothing. It's a local group where you can post things that you want to give away to people, or you can ask for gifts of things that people might have that they don't need anymore. So I put a post on my local Buy Nothing page asking if anyone had any large pots they don't use in their garden anymore, and somebody gifted me 2 huge large pots. and they're both a plastic resin type pot, so they're rather lightweight, and they're perfect for growing what I'm going to be growing in right here. So I'm super grateful and thankful that there's so many generous people in my community that I was able to get this for free. I've gotten lots of other things for my garden for free from that Buy Nothing page. So if you've never heard of it, get on Facebook, search Buy Nothing, and then your local city name, and try to find a Buy Nothing group for you and see what you can offer to people in your community of things of yours, and then see if there's any gifts that you can use for your home. So in this container, I'm going to be growing my plants that I recommend that you purchase as starts. Now in my own garden, I grew tomatoes and peppers both from seed, but I started those seeds back in February. So it took a long time to get them to maturity, or not to maturity, but to a point where I could plant them outside. So this container is going to have one tomato plant. This is an heirloom, oh man, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Janou Flamme. Don't laugh at me for my crazy pronunciation. This is going to be a plum-sized tomato, and it says that it's about the size and color of an apricot. The tomato selection at my local Fred Meyer store was definitely getting a little bit slimmer. If you wanted to buy a tomato in a 1 gallon pot, there was a lot of great selection. The 1 gallon pot tomatoes were about $5. This was only $2 for this small, like 2.5 inch container. I know that our local nurseries that are more independently owned, like Windmill Gardens, still have a lot of tomatoes in a lot of cool different varieties. And you can get a tomato start at Windmill for about $2.50 or $3 per start at this size. So I'm going to be planting this tomato, and then I've got 2 different varieties of peppers. These were also each only $1.99 for the start. So here I've got this California Wonder bell pepper. I've grown that one before, and that's also the one type that I'm growing from seed in my garden. But what I'm really excited about is the bell pepper King of the North. This is supposed to be good for northern climates, so I'm really excited to see how this one compares or turns out compared to my other plants. I'm going to zoom in this so you can see a little bit closer of what I'll be planting in here. Now I'm also going to be adding a couple other things that I did not count in the total cost of this. So this container is pretty large, and these would be happy in here just by themselves, but I couldn't resist planting a little bit of flowers in this container to try to attract some pollinating insects. So here I have some sweet alyssum, which bees love. And then here I have some verbena obsession coral with eye. So it's a cute pink with a little white eye in the center. Now this was, I think, $3.50 for the 6-pack, and I believe this alyssum was maybe only $2 for that. So I didn't include these in the price because you don't need them. I just really want to make this container pop and look beautiful. Before I get my planting started, I'm going to make sure I mix in my granulated fertilizer. The recommended application rate for this in pots is 1.5 cups per 16-inch pot. This is a 23-inch pot, so it's going to need about, I'd say, at least 2 cups of fertilizer. I probably only have about a cup and a half left, so I'm just going to dump it all in there, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm going to water with some, or give it some water-soluble fertilizer soon. The first plant that I'm going to plant in this container is the tomato, because it's going to be at the back of the container. This tomato is an heirloom Janou Flamme. I have no clue how to pronounce that. I sound like a dork, but I don't care. So this tomato I got for $2 in this size start. The store had also tomato starts in 1 gallon pots, which are just going to be a more mature plant and bring your fruit, grow you fruit sooner. So if you have a budget where you can afford a more expensive start, you could always get one in a 1-gallon pot. The selection at Fred Meyer was starting to get a little bit low on tomatoes. So if you head to a more local nursery like Windmill, I was there recently, and they still had a great selection of smaller sized starts for about $2.50 a start, I think. And there was a ton of great variety. So when I plant this tomato, the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch off these lowest leaves right here, here, and here. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm actually going to plant this in the soil above those leaf nodes, and those are going to turn into roots. And it's just going to give this a deeper, stronger root system for a healthier plant. Now, tomatoes are going to need some sort of support and structure to help keep them from flopping over. So I'll be planting this with a little tomato cage, and I'll show you in just a minute. I've already got the fertilizer in here, so I'm going to get this planted. The roots on this don't look super root bound. They look great, just the right time to be getting this in the ground or a pot. I'm going to tickle those roots just a little bit to loosen them up so they're not in that square shape, and it's easier for them to start growing down into the container. There's also a few what are called suckers that I'm going to pinch off that I should have showed you sooner. So here is this branch, and in this armpit is what it's often called, is another little leaf growing off. And I'm going to pinch those off because those would turn into separate main vines. And I'm going to try to keep this down to one main vine since it is in a pot growing with other vegetables. Now, when you plant a tomato, you want to make sure that you know what you're going to do for your support for the plant. I'm going to be using this old rickety tomato cage, and this tomato cage is really actually not that great for tomatoes because it's so small. This would be better for cucumbers, but since my cucumber pots are so shallow, it really wouldn't do well. So I'm going to place this tomato cage right now because I'm going to plant my other plants around it and get this plant tucked in nicely. I'm going to try to make sure I keep these leaves and branches off the soil because they don't like to come into contact with the soil. It is not good for the leaves. Now this tomato it's going to bust out of that tomato cage. It's way too small for it, but I'll be using the railings of my deck as additional support and can have them kind of hang over the sides of the deck or tie it to the deck with string as needed. Now that I have my tomato placed, I'll be planting my 2 bell pepper plants. The recommended spacing on these is about 12 to 18 inches apart, but this year I've been all about pushing the bounds on recommended spacing and planting things a lot closer so I can maximize my harvest. The root system on these also looks really good, but I am going to just tickle those a little bit to open them up and get them starting to grow out. You know what I need to make sure I do that I'm really not good at as a gardener is I need to label my plants. I've got my pots labeled with little popsicle sticks, but I almost forgot to label which pepper is which, and then that wouldn't really help me find out if this new variety is really a better variety for me. So I'll just be sticking that plant tag into the container. I used to think it was tacky to have plant tags in my garden, but really it's helpful for me to remember what's what and to learn more about what varieties do best. And if there's a plant tag, who cares if there's a plant tag and somebody sees it? It doesn't matter if you bought it as a start or if you started it from seed. Let there be a tag if you want a tag. Okay, so this container would be great as it is. However, I really want to just make it pop with some beautiful flowers and see if I can attract some extra pollinators up here to this upper deck area, because the only other plant I have here on this deck is this beautiful lime tree over there. So as you can see, I went a little bit crazy with this container, but I think with good care, consistent watering, and consistent fertilizing, this is going to look spectacular. This tomato is going to bush out and flow back over the corner of my railings here. The verbena is going to mound up a little bit and then kind of trail over the pot. Same with this sweet alyssum. These peppers will bush out and hopefully kind of spread to the side. I've got them planted at a little bit of an angle, and in the next few months this container's really gonna pop. Now all of my containers have drainage holes in them. It's really important that you have drainage holes in your containers so your plants aren't sitting in wet soil. Another thing on a container this size, if you have a container this size and are filling it up with soil that wasn't for free, you can also put some empty garden pots in it upside down to take up a little room in the bottom of the pot. I'm really maxing this pot out, so I want to make sure that it was all soil, plus the soil was free, and that way I feel a lot more confident in overplanting this container. Now how cute does that container look? I love those pops of pink with that white sweet alyssum, and in a few months those tomatoes and peppers are going to be filling out and looking gorgeous. Here's the final placement of all my plants for my container garden here up on my deck. In this corner here I've got the tomato, peppers, flowers, and in that pot on the ground is that yellow summer squash. Those containers in the middle are the 2 cucumber pots that I'll be comparing the different water-soluble fertilizers for. And in that back corner over there, I've got a lime tree, and then down on the ground I've got the purple plum radishes and those Ferrari green beans. So I'm so excited with how this garden turned out, and you could so easily start your very own first garden right now in the first week of June. Don't be too nervous to start. Just get out there and buy whatever vegetable starts you want or vegetable seeds you want and get started. Make sure to give them some nice, healthy, amended soil and some fertilizer and lots of tender, loving care, and they will do great. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I would really love to know if you plant a garden of your own. Tell me in the comments what you want to grow and if you're starting a garden for the first time. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to like it and subscribe to my channel. You can hit that notification bell so that you get notified every time I put out a new video. Soon I'm going to be heading down to my local strawberry farm and getting strawberries and making some homemade jam, and I'm going to make a video to show you all about how easy it is to make your own fresh local jam so you can enjoy that for the rest of the year. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I hope this video motivates you to start your own garden.